Vincent, Dublin Airport is going through a period of record growth at the moment. There were 28 million people last year through T1 and T2. How's 2017 looking?
2017 has got off to a good start. So first quarter we had traffic up 5%.
Great.
I think what we've seen a little bit in the first quarter is there's more of an Irish outbound flavour to the numbers. So while you'll have seen inbound numbers were up slightly, the bigger proportion of our business in Q1 has been people probably benefiting from the resurgence in the economy, the second holiday, the ski trips. Those things are very much back on the agenda. So we've had a very busy start to the year so far on the back of record traffic last year.
Great. And do you expect that to continue into 2017? We hear announcements all the time about new routes and so on. So I presume that all feeds into a fairly positive environment here.
It does. We grew 3 million passengers last year and 3 the year before. So I don't think we'd expect that absolute pace of growth to keep continuing every year. But if we just look at the summer schedule for next year, we've got over 1 million more seats at Dublin for the 7-month summer period. We've got some very interesting new services, 11 new routes coming in over the year. We've a strong long-haul dimension to that. We've got Qatar starting in June to Doha. We have 2 Norwegian services, and indeed Norwegian have services from a number of airports in Ireland commencing for the first time direct to Stewart in upstate New York and Providence, Rhode Island. So those start from Dublin in the summer. Delta have a new service to Boston. So, and in addition to that, we have a number of new short-haul destinations in Europe. So business is strong, and I think we're going to continue to see both a mix of more operators in the market. We've seen a 50% growth in the number of carriers operating at Dublin Airport in the last 3 years. So more competition, more choice, and more destinations.
And you mentioned those North American routes and those transatlantic routes. Dublin, of course, is strategically well situated between the European bloc and North America. Do you see Dublin Airport as being a hub into the future?
I think the word we'd use is a gateway rather than a hub. Hubs tend to have maybe very large proportions of their traffic connecting. It's still around 5% in Dublin, significant growth in the last number of years. But what we see is a meeting of the existing and growing long-haul network with the existing very strong short-haul network, so that people have the option of connecting here at Dublin, particularly on transatlantic. Pre-clearance is such a huge unique service offering that we have in Dublin that you don't have the capability of accessing in other airports. And for markets like the north of England or into Europe, the depth of connectivity that we have in Dublin means connecting through Dublin is a really viable option. But we'd still see the point-to-point direct business in both directions to be the mainstay of our business here.
And I know you work very closely with the tourism agencies, Tourism Ireland in particular, in overseas markets, encouraging traffic to Dublin as a destination in its own right.
We do, and that's both in really reinforcing the traditional markets and also the new and emerging markets. And I think on the former, we saw spectacular growth on the UK market last year. Despite the fact that we have 10 million passengers between Ireland and the UK, and it's a really long-standing, mature market, we saw 7% growth in London and 16% growth on UK provincial traffic last year. I think everybody in the tourism sector has really seen a return of the strength of UK visitors in the last year, and that's very welcome. But also, as we look forward, we need to ensure that we're tapping into particularly the emerging markets of Asia and other parts of the world where we'll see the future tourists coming from.
Yeah, and on that point about emerging markets, there's a lot of talk in the media about a potential airline en route from China. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've said for a long time that it's inevitable that there will be direct links into those markets because the growth in traffic has been happening over a number of years. People are making their way indirectly to and from those markets. We're in constant discussion and dialogue with various airlines in relation to not just China but the region in general, and we'd be confident that that breakthrough will happen. Of course, that in itself will mean that things like the tourist product on the ground will need to be equipped for a new tourist into the market. And I think one of the things that we would feel is that Ireland needs to carve itself out as a premier destination. It's not a mass market destination for countries that are as large and have as many tourists as China, for example. So we really need to carve out a very strong position for Ireland as a different market for Chinese visitors to come to.
It's value nearly as much as volume, and I think the Irish tourism industry is aware of that and works hard to make sure that the quality of the offering here is of a really high standard.
Yes, and it's green, and it's got culture, and it's got a lot of things that are different perhaps to the city breaks that people will have perhaps as their first ventures into Europe. And I think really capitalising on that and the product here will be important as we hopefully do our part by stimulating demand with direct services.
Absolutely. You mentioned 3 million additional visitors last year, or traffic through the airport, 3 million the year before. How are you coping with that sort of increased demand? Are there capacity pressures, and how are things going with the development of the parallel runway?
Yeah, the extra demand and the filling out, not just of the day but across the whole year, puts a strain on resources, not just physical capacity but obviously staff. We've invested heavily in both. We've employed more staff here in the airport, and we continually invest. The runway tends to take the headlines. It's obviously going to be a critical project. It will deliver additional capacity, and we've started the enabling works for that project now. But we invest about 100 million a year, every year at the airport, in a whole variety of projects. They take different shapes from time to time. Terminal 1 has been experiencing a continual upgrading in recent times, but just behind me is our current existing main runway, and we're in a very extensive project of refurbishment of that runway before we build the second one. So those are all things that either add capacity or keep the operations going here, and our job is to continually provide an enhanced and improved service as we see that growth happening.
And of course, nobody can stand still, and particularly a key piece of infrastructure like an airport, investment needs to continue on an ongoing basis. You have a big land bank here as well, and recent news is that there's planning permission for a major 400-bedroom hotel. Is that something that you guys are tackling in the next year or two?
Yes, we've gone out to market for partners to develop that hotel, and we're in advanced discussions there. We hope to see that hotel in operation in about 2 years from now. So 400-bedroom hotel, I think it puts it number 4 or 5 in terms of scale in the country. So I think there's been a lot of discussion about the need to, particularly in the Dublin market, to add capacity to the hotel bedroom stock. And again, I think this will be a valuable asset to the tourist market here in Ireland.
Fantastic, and much needed. Dublin, of course, is such a key piece of the Irish tourism jigsaw. What's good for Dublin and Dublin Airport is good for the country as a whole. But there is an argument that Dublin is getting too much of its share. And within an aviation context, there are other airports such as Cork and Shannon, which are, if you like, hungry for more business and have a bit of capacity. What's your view on the sort of regional dispersion of Irish tourism?
I think there's a degree of a natural impact that has happened in the country in the last number of years, particularly when you look at the road infrastructure. The country has literally become smaller. There are few catchment areas of sizable populations that aren't within 2 hours drive of Dublin. So I think it's pretty natural, combined with the scale of the city, the capital city, and the investment here, that the range of destinations, frequencies that you have at Dublin Airport attract passengers from throughout the country. That said, the other airports, and obviously we manage Cork Airport within Dublin within DAA, we are very pleased to see the growth that has been experienced in Cork. Very excited about the fact that Cork will have its first transatlantic service, again with Norwegian, starting this year. So I think there's room for growth across all of the airports, and we're happy that the spread of impact that we have at Dublin Airport is also spread around the country. There are over 100,000 jobs that are related to the activities that happen at Dublin Airport, according to a survey we carried out in recent years. And passengers arriving at Dublin, whether they go north, south, east or west or stay within the region, bring a benefit to the entire country. And of course the economic activity that is supported by the airport is equally vital.
Absolutely. There are clouds on the horizon, of course. I mean, we'd all like to see the continued surge in growth to continue year after year. Brexit, though, is I suppose, the big external issue that we all have to wrestle with. We in the Irish tourism industry are concerned about its possible impact on Irish tourism. It also has an impact, of course, directly on aviation. Do you have any views on that? Have you seen any effect to date, and how do you think it will play out over the next year or two?
We haven't seen an effect to date in the numbers. And I mentioned the strength of the UK market last year, with obviously the Brexit vote happening halfway through that year. The uncertainty in the market, the uncertainty that surrounds the economic situation, nobody favours that. That's not good for business generally. And then obviously in a market like aviation, where there are rules and regulations, many of which are governed across Europe, there's a need for those to be replaced in whatever new mechanism. So I think we're all, no more than any other business, we're interested in seeing when we get to some finality on those things and clarity. My own expectation is that while timelines might work, I think most things will require transition phases, and there won't necessarily be a big bang or a millennium event that such as we looked at before. I think things will happen more gradually. But it is a concern that, particularly with the scale of the market between Ireland and the UK, that there is that uncertainty hanging out there.
Great. Vincent, thank you so much. Thank you for Dublin Airport's contribution to Irish tourism. It's certainly invaluable. Thanks for your time, and best of luck this year and next.
Thank you.